Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 6, Episode 11, The Switch. Hello everyone. I hope everyone's doing well out there. I'm doing okay. I am kind of gearing up for a trip next week to Mexico for a family wedding. I'm really excited about it. The whole family's going and got to get all my outfits figured out. So there's always a little bit of stress when travel is involved, and especially the entire family going together, and who is in charge of packing for the kids. You can't see it, but I'm pointing to me. That's just kind of like simmering in my head until I'm done with the trip next week. But anyway, it's going to be fun and I'm really excited about it. I did some traveling just recently. I was in Salt Lake City for a commercial shoot and it was very fun. It was interesting. It was an overnight shoot. So my call time to set was 9:45 p.m. and I wrapped right around 5:45 a.m. So I was up all night, and it was a little bizarre trying to figure out like sleeping during the day. You know, I can like fit in a nap during the day. I'm not one of those people who like just can't nap, but it was maybe an hour nap at like 2 p.m. But I think the adrenaline of, being on set, having to do a job and, be funny on camera and all that good stuff, that kept me awake for sure. But when I got back to my hotel room around 6 a.m., I crashed and luckily woke up before I had to check out. It was a noon checkout. And I remember as I was sort of drifting off to sleep going, I really should probably set an alarm, which I didn't. What if I wake up and it's afternoon and I've like blown the checkout time? Anyway, I did wake up about 4 hours later. So, that was lucky. And then I called hoping for a later checkout if I could just get like a couple more hours because I needed to shower. I needed to wash my hair for this shoot. They put my hair in these 2 French braids, and there was pomade and hairspray. My hair was like a helmet, and I slept on it. And so there was really no option of me just like keeping the messy braid to fly home. Just me personally, I didn't want to go out into the world like that. So I was like, I have to have enough time to shower, wash my hair, style my hair, do all that good stuff. Anyway, that's a lot of detail, but I made it work. I did not get the late checkout. You guys tell me, I feel like it's always crap. Like every time I've asked for a late checkout, they always kind of go through this, well, let me check for you. I know we're pretty full. And then they come back maybe like a minute later and they're like, I'm so sorry. We're actually all full. And I guess in certain situations that very much could be true. But I was staying in a pretty like run-of-the-mill hotel in like a suburb of Salt Lake City. Anything like it was surrounded by chain restaurants, no like major attraction. Like my point is, I can't imagine this hotel is full, at any point right now. Like it just didn't make any sense. It's not like a vacation time. So anyway, my theory is that they just never grant a late checkout and they go through please hold, let me check for you. And it's totally from the Seinfeld episode where he's at the rental car place where he's like, oh, watch this. She's going to go talk to the manager, but they're really not going to talk about anything. I feel like they're like, oh yeah, let me just check if we can give you a late checkout. And then they probably put me on hold, play a game of solitaire on their computer, and then come back and say, no, I'm so sorry. Whatever. I survived. It was fine. I was pretty tired. I was kind of a zombie for the remainder of the day and the flight home, but it was all good. It was fine. The shoot itself was interesting. We shot in this really cool like home store, which I guess is like a Salt Lake City or a Utah store, Utah-based store. It was gorgeous. But that was the reason we had to shoot overnight so that we weren't shooting during store hours. So that was the whole reason for it being a total night shoot. Um, the energy on set was pretty low. By the time it got to my scene shooting that, it was like everyone in the crew, this was their second night of being up all night. So I was there on day 2. And so no one had energy. I mean, they did their best. Everyone was really nice. Everyone was like, the director was awesome. Like, she had a lot of energy. I'm not saying everyone was just kind of dead to the world, but I definitely felt like how tired they were when I was shooting my scene. But at any rate, I think it turned out well. Hopefully they liked me and they'll ask me back for other things, but I felt really lucky to be cast in such a fun spot. In other news, I wanted to let you all know that if you want to hear me on another podcast, I was a guest on a fantastic podcast called How Have You Not Seen That? Now, it is a podcast that has guests on who haven't seen pretty popular movies, like classic movies that are known to be like, everyone's seen that kind of movie, but this podcast focuses on those types of movies, but with guests who haven't seen that movie, which is obviously why it's called How Have You Not Seen That? Anyway, I was on it along with my husband, so we both have not seen the movie Grease. And I'm not ashamed of that. I get into it in that episode, why I think I kind of missed the boat on Grease, and my husband does as well. Anyway, it's a really, really fun show in general. All the episodes are really funny, and I highly recommend it. It's called How Have You Not Seen That podcast, and I'll also include a link in the show notes. Okay, now it's time to get into the episode. The synopsis for The Switch is as follows. Jerry and George successfully develop a way for Jerry to break up with his too serious girlfriend so he can date her beautiful, happy-go-lucky roommate. Kramer's mother returns to his life and ends up dating Newman. George is upset because he thinks his girlfriend is secretly bulimic and making George waste money on her dinners. Elaine loans out Mr. Pitt's tennis racket to help her get a better job, then finds she's unable to get the racket back. This episode was written by Bruce Kirschbaum and Sam Cass. All right, we start out at the tennis club. Jerry and his girlfriend and Elaine are there. Elaine has to pick up Mr. Pitt's racket. It was being restrung. A woman approaches Elaine, and it's Jocelyn Landis from Doubleday. This was the woman who told her she had no grace during Elaine's interview. And Elaine's like, oh, yes, I remember you from the job I didn't get. Well, Jocelyn compliments Elaine on her tennis game. Oh, I'm not very good. No, she says, you exhibited a lot of grace out there. Really? Grace? Back to the grace convo. Miss Landis asks if she's found anything yet, and Elaine says, well, no, not really. And she says, let's keep in touch. Something may be opening up in a couple of weeks at Doubleday. Then she spots Mr. Pitt's Brewline racket on the counter, and she's very taken by it. Jerry overhears this and informs Elaine that Newman plays with the Brewline. Newman plays tennis? He's fantastic. Jocelyn asks if she can borrow the racket, and Elaine lets her. But how will you get it back? Well, I could come by your office and pick it up tomorrow. Oh, she's so appreciative, and she thanks Elaine and leaves. Jerry questions why she did that. Elaine's like, well, what could I do? I might have a chance to get a real job at Doubleday. And wouldn't that be so great? She wouldn't have to work for Mr. Pitt anymore. Jerry's girlfriend, Sandy, says, I have to get going. So Jerry makes a joke about playing ping pong next time because it's easier to jump over the net. She says, yeah, and she exits. The actress who plays Sandy is Jan Karam, and wow, I was very pleasantly surprised when I looked her up. I scrolled down her IMDb profile, which is the primary site I look at when I research these guest stars, and I didn't really see a lot of credits, but then I read her bio on the page. And apparently she's quite the stand-up comic. I mean, she's been in the stand-up world for 30 years. She's written a ton of shows and performed in numerous clubs all over the country. She really doesn't get too much comedy in this episode, but I do like her as Sandy. It's a really funny performance. I think to be the girlfriend that doesn't laugh, what a fun character to play. And I think she does a really good job. All right, back to the scene. After Sandy leaves, Elaine points out to Jerry, did you ever notice she never laughs? He's like, really? Yeah, think about it. My take on this scene, I like the setup for Elaine's plot here. Now, if you listened to the Chaperone episode, you may remember how much I love this character, Jocelyn Landis, who is played brilliantly by Gail Strickland. She just cracks me up. The way she talks, just her demeanor. I tried to do an impression of her in the Chaperone episode, and I'm still terrible at it, but it's almost like she's running out of breath with each word. I still can't do it, but just listen when you hear her talk. It's the way she speaks. I don't know if it's the way she normally speaks or if it's like a character thing she did for Miss Landis, but either way, I absolutely love it. Now, of course, her telling Elaine that she exhibited a lot of grace out there, it's huge considering she completely dismissed the possibility of Elaine having grace at that interview. So that's a really big moment for Elaine, and I love that we see that. And it also seems that Miss Landis is very swayed by Grace. I mean, it completely changes her mind about Elaine. I mean, the fact that she's like, well, let's keep in touch. There might be an opening. I'm not sure she would have done that if Elaine wasn't so graceful on the tennis court. So Miss Landis, man, she's like a grace whore. Another thing I love about Miss Landis and Elaine is this fun status dynamic that they have. Miss Landis holds all the power while Elaine is just so desperate to get out from under Mr. Pitt's thumb. So we know really what each of them, where they stand, and what their wants are. And that's really important to me when I'm watching a show, when I'm watching characters. And so I just wanted to point that out for all of you, I don't know, writing nerds out there or just in general nerds. I think it's a very nerdy thing to notice. And I don't know, I don't care. I'm proud of it. I really like that Elaine is the one to point out to Jerry that Sandy never laughs. I feel like that's totally something, like a friend would do in general, but definitely Elaine would do for Jerry. All right, next we are on the street. George is showing Kramer a picture of his girlfriend in the paper because she's a model. Kramer is so impressed, says, oh, George, you're becoming part of the glitterati. Now, the notes about nothing defines glitterati as a smart set of highly fashionable celebrities, but Kramer just defines it as people who glitter. Kramer mentions, wow, she's a slim gal, and George says, yeah, and it's incredible. She eats everything, and she still looks like that. And Kramer suggests, well, maybe she's bulimic. Kramer, she's a model. Exactly. And George thinks about it. He mentions how he does notice she tends to go to the bathroom right after a meal. There you go, monkey boy. All right, next we are at Paparadella restaurant. George is on a date with the very slim model girlfriend, and she's eating a plate of spaghetti, like crushing it. I mean, she's really eating it like George, just scarfing it down, shoveling it into her mouth, using the bread to sop up all that sauce. George is just kind of staring at her, now he's got that whole bulimic thing on his mind. She looks at him, aren't you hungry? Just enjoying watching you, he says. The actress here is Charlotte Lewis, and she plays Nina, George's girlfriend. Now, I didn't really recognize a lot of the credits, but she did have a breakout role in the film The Golden Child with Eddie Murphy in the 80s. I think she's funny as Nina. I think, her performance is perfectly fine. The next scene, we're at a restaurant and Jerry's on a date with his girlfriend, Sandy. And she asks Jerry, well, did you like the movie? And then he makes all these cracks about how the Frankenstein in the movie wasn't wearing a sport jacket. And so that just felt off to him. He's doing all these bits. So Sandy, of course, doesn't laugh, but instead says, that's funny. And Jerry just says, well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. We are now back at Paparadella restaurant. Nina is now licking her plate clean. She leans back. I'm so full. And George encourages her to, be full. Yes, feel the fullness. Let the enzymes do their work. Then she tries to excuse herself to use the bathroom, but he grabs her hand pretty forcefully, saying, no, you don't need to freshen. I couldn't have you any fresher. I have to freshen George, she keeps saying, trying to pry her hand away. But he's got a pretty good grip. She struggles a bit, but finally she breaks free, extremely irritated. All right, next we're at Jerry's apartment. Jerry is telling Elaine she was right about this girlfriend not laughing. The jokes kept bouncing off her like Superman. I told ya. And Jerry points out that even if she does enjoy a joke, she doesn't laugh. She just says, "That's funny." Elaine goes over to the phone to call Miss Landis about getting the racket back. But on the phone call, she finds out that she hurt her arm playing tennis, and it's pretty bad. George enters. He's distraught because he heard a blah noise from the bathroom. Oh, Jerry says, you think she was refunding? George is so upset. Elaine tries to clarify here, but you can tell she knows the real reason. So you're concerned? Elaine, of course I'm concerned. I'm paying for those meals. Elaine motions like, yeah, I knew it. It's like throwing money down the toilet, in a manner of speaking, Jerry says. George says, you know what? He needs someone in the bathroom to confirm it. Kramer enters to return Jerry's scrubber. And George goes on to say, what about one of those matrons that work in a bathroom? Maybe he could bribe one to spy on his girlfriend. Kramer sort of makes this motion at Jerry, who says, I can't really help you out with that. George sort of clocks what's going on and lays into Kramer about it. Finally, Kramer breaks and says, my mother's a matron. Elaine asks, Babs? But he says, I can't help you out, George. And George is pleading with him. But Kramer says, I haven't spoken to my mother in 5 years. We just can't see eye to eye. And he's still carrying a lot of pain from his childhood. And George won't quit. And even Jerry says, come on, you have to face her sometime, Kramer. My take on this scene, Elaine's portion of the scene is just to move her story along. She finds out that Miss Landis hurt her arm. And obviously the scene is really to serve George and Kramer's plots. All right, next we're at Doubleday. We're in Miss Landis's office. Elaine enters to find Miss Landis in a very elaborate arm brace that's elevated on a metal contraption. Oh, what happened? Miss Landis tells Elaine that she injured her humeral epicondylitis, which is the medical term for tennis elbow. Oh, she is so upset. The doctor told her she may never play again. Elaine tries to comfort her. Oh, I'm sure you'll be able to. If I can't play tennis, I don't know what I'll do. Elaine's trying again to comfort her. Oh, there are plenty of things you can do. Chess, mahjong. Miss Landis is getting more and more hysterical. You don't know how lucky you are to be healthy. Elaine is still listing things she could be doing instead of tennis. Biking and hiking. And then Miss Landis asks, what am I going to do? Elaine can see the racket kind of propped up against the wall, but she doesn't really want to ask. She tries, but gets interrupted by Miss Landis sobbing. If I can't play tennis, I have no reason to live. Elaine's like, forget it. I'll just leave, and tells her to, good luck. Take care of that condylitis, whatever. My take on this scene, I am not exaggerating when I say this is one of my favorite performances in the entire series. And I'm talking about Gail Strickland crying. That slow, it gets me every time. I don't know if it's like universally funny to everyone, but for me, I cannot help but crack up every time I see it. Now, on the flip side, the scene also really bugs me because I just don't buy that Elaine couldn't ask for the racket back or just take it back. I know Miss Landis is upset, but I don't know. That's just not enough for me to believe that Elaine would just leave without it. And if that's what they wanted the plot to call for, fine. But at least there should have been more of an effort for Elaine to get it. Like maybe she does like reach for it and Miss Landis freaks out even more or something. I needed more. I needed more of a conflict there for Elaine. I just didn't believe it. And so my theory on this, because this is a very funny episode. I do love the Kramer plot. I like the switch of the roommates plot that's yet to come, but like Jerry's girlfriend not laughing at his jokes. Like I think there's so many strong things in this episode that to me, it feels like everything written for Elaine was just an afterthought. Now, if you follow us on social media, you would have seen how I came up with afterthought plot in the moment when I made my video asking for comments for this episode. I'm still pretty proud of that, you guys. But yes, I just feel like Elaine's plot is so weak because it was an afterthought. An afterthought plot, people. All right, next we are in the restaurant bathroom. Babs, Kramer's mother, is setting up all the various bathroom accoutrements in preparation for her matron shift. Kramer and George enter. "Mom," he says. She turns around and almost falls over in shock. She yells out, "Cosmo!" George looks over at Kramer. "Cosmo?" Now, Cherie North is the actress who plays Babs Kramer. She performed in dozens of shows and films since the 1950s. And I really like her as Babs. This is a fun character. I feel like Cherie North and Michael Richards had great chemistry. I didn't really know what to expect from Kramer's mom. I remember first seeing this episode. I'm positive I saw it when it aired because just a side note, this was huge. Like revealing Kramer's first name, they put so much marketing into this. I just remember commercials running. Oh my God, we're going to find out Kramer's first name. Like they teased it so much that I know that I watched this on the night it aired. Besides, of course, really wanting to know what Kramer's first name is, I remember sort of I didn't even know what to picture when it came to Kramer's mother, but I thought this was a really good choice. I really enjoyed Cherie North's performance. All right, next we are in Jerry's apartment. Jerry is so confused why Elaine didn't ask for the racket back. Same, Jerry, same. Elaine explains she couldn't bring herself to do it because of how upset Miss Landis was. Jerry asks Elaine, well, when does Mr. Pitt need his racket? Well, he needs it the next day for a match with Ethel Kennedy. He needs a $300 brew line to beat Ethel Kennedy? Yeah, he'll only play with his racket, Elaine says. Then Jerry says, just go to her office when she's at lunch and take it. That's stealing, Elaine says. Stealing? You loaned her the racket. I know. George enters. They ask about Babs. Oh, it's all arranged, he says. Oh, what's she like? Oh, she's a Kramer. George has this kind of swagger to him because he tells them he also picked up a juicy nugget about their friend. He tells them he got the first name. Oh, they are so excited. You found out Kramer's first name? Jerry's like, I've been trying to get it out of him for years. Come on, tell us. So he says, Cosmo. They sort of pause and take it in, and then they laugh and laugh. Kramer enters. They try to stop laughing, but he knows something's up. He asks, oh, what's so funny? They pause, and finally Elaine blurts out, Cosmo! And they all start laughing again. Kramer's like, all right, the cat's out of the bag. Elaine's like, it's not such a bad name. And Kramer says he's been running from that name all his life, but no more. He says from now on, he's Cosmo Kramer. My take on this scene, the conversation between Elaine and Jerry, it's super annoying to me again, because I'm with Jerry in the sense that, like, why wouldn't you just take the damn racket? And okay, we get her explanation about why she couldn't take the racket back. The whole explanation is what we saw. She just was like, oh, she was so upset. She was crying, talking about how she may never play tennis again. But then her reaction of well, that's stealing, when he suggests to get it when, Miss Landis is at lunch. Oh, that's so irritating to me. It's such like filler dialogue in this weak ass plot. The fact that she says, that's stealing. And then he's like, but you loaned her the racket. And then she goes, I know. Like, what? This isn't our Elaine. It's not funny. And I've said this before on the podcast, but like, I don't like or think it tracks very well when Jerry or one of the men in the cast has to like explain the logic to Elaine. First of all, I think she's smarter than all of them combined. So I hate when that happens. But like, yeah, these moments of Elaine just kind of sort of lost and not being able to see things logically. I just don't like it. And I extra hate it when Jerry has to explain it to her. It's not our Elaine. Now, the Kramer name reveal Cosmo it's a very fun moment. I love that they are all together for this, and seeing them all share in this pleasure is so fun. You really get a sense of their friendships. And even though that's not the point, they're ripping on their friend's name. I just so love it. Like, they're all kind of bonding over this because I think in this group, ridicule is sort of their love language, right? Like, they're not going to be all happy-go-lucky and lovey-dovey with each other. And we all know the no hugging, no learning rule. But these moments, they're all making fun of Kramer and laughing at him. But that's the dynamic of the friendship. So I love seeing those moments. All right, next we're at Sandy's apartment. Sandy's roommate answers the door and Jerry asks if Sandy's there. She says, "Oh yeah, she's in the shower. Do you want to come in?" Jerry cracks a joke about how he would love to, but he didn't bring his towel. She loves this joke. She laughs and walks away, leaving Jerry contemplating something. The actress who plays Laura, the roommate, is Heather Medway. Now, she's appeared in dozens of shows in the 80s and 90s. It doesn't look like she's really acting anymore. And I really think she's a perfect woman for this role. It's a small part, but even in this short scene, she convinced me she is the better one to date and a much better fit for Jerry. All right, next we are at Monk's. Jerry's telling George how the roommate laughed at everything he said. And she had one of those great sounding laughs, so like lilting and feminine, no coarse ha's. And George agrees. Oh, he hates the big coarse ha's. Ha, ha. Well, I'd like to point out, dear listeners, that here's another reason George and Jerry would be repulsed by me. I do laugh with a big coarse ha. I'm not proud of it. I can't help it though. It's just how I laugh. I do have a big ha. Luckily, my husband likes it. He says he likes it. I mean, I kind of believe him, but he's stuck with me through all the ha's. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of go over all the reasons that these men would be disgusted by me. I have a big nose, which, we know George doesn't like. I have man hands, which we know Jerry doesn't like. I have toe fungus, which Jerry is disgusted by. And now the big coarse ha's. I mean, just racking up all these really unattractive qualities. You know what? I'd never be able to date him. I just have to come to terms with this. Jerry adds how the roommate also possessed many qualities prized by the superficial man. And, that, he's got a bit of a problem here. George gets very serious. "If I think I hear you correctly, you should never mention this to anyone again," he says. He tells Jerry that the switch cannot be done. No one has ever successfully accomplished the roommate switch. But you know what? Jerry intends to undertake this. And if George is too scared or he doesn't have the stomach for it, then get out of here. Come on, what's it going to be? So George reluctantly agrees to get to work with Jerry. And then we see a montage of their table as they work, crumpled up papers, multiple cups of coffee, various foods. We see them on the street getting into heated arguments. And then it ends at Jerry's apartment. They're exhausted. They've been working on this for hours. Jerry's lost hope. "We can't do the switch. It was a stupid idea. I'm stuck with the non-laugher and that's it." And George says, "You know what? We'll come up with something." So he leaves, but then he comes back a few seconds later screaming, "I've got it!" All right, the next scene, still at Jerry's apartment, and George is explaining what he got, his big idea. And it's pretty much Jerry asking for a menage a trois. He said Sandy will be so grossed out and she'll throw him out, and then she'll seek the comfort of the roommate about his horrible suggestion. The roommate will sympathize with her, but can't help but be a little flattered by Jerry's interest. A few days go by, a call is placed while Sandy's at work. There's some awkwardness between Jerry and the roommate, but with his irresistible humor to her, an invitation to a friendly dinner is proffered. "Wait," Jerry says, they're roommates. I can't go out with Laura behind Sandy's back." George is like, "Come on, figure this out. Sandy wants nothing to do with you. She'll say to Laura, if you want to go out with that pervert, that's your problem." Oh yes, Jerry is so pumped. This simple yet perfect plan will definitely work. Also, I just wanted to mention real quick the really fun device that they use in this episode where they're kind of going over the plan of this menage a trois thing. We see scenes of the women sort of acting out what they're talking about. So I thought that was really well done, really fun. All right, next we're at Miss Landis's office. Elaine arrives in an empty office, and she sees the brew line and goes to take it when Miss Landis's assistant comes in. "Can I help you? What are you doing with that racket?" Elaine explains, "Well, it's actually mine. Miss Landis borrowed it." He's a very snippy guy. No, you can't take that racket." She insists, "No, I can't take it. Listen, sweetheart, I don't know who you are or what you're doing here." Elaine's like, "You know what? I'm just going to go." And the guy wrestles the racket away from her. "Fine," she says, "forget it. You don't have to mention any of this to Miss Landis, do you?" "I don't have to, but I will." My take on this scene, they're dragging out this plot. Of course, it needs a resolution, so that's the reason for this scene. I have to say, though, I love this interaction between Elaine and the assistant. He definitely steals the scene for me. He's very funny, especially with his delivery of every line. Like, I love the way he's like, "What are you doing with that racket?" And then "I don't have to, but I will." Very funny actor. All right, next we're on the street. Kramer is walking arm in arm with his mom. They've reconciled. He's saying hello to everyone he knows and introducing them to his mom. It's kind of sweet. He's very proud of his mom now. Next, we're at Sandy's apartment, and Jerry has made the suggestion to Sandy. I believe it's pronounced ménage à trois. She's like, "What?" And then, to Jerry's surprise, she says, "Ooh, that's a wild idea." "Huh?" Right, next we're at Monk's. Kramer tells Babs he wants her to quit that matron job and that they could go into business together, but only if she's clean, and that offends her big time. She swats at him, says she's been clean for 2 years. "Well, anyway, what could we do together?" "Oh, he has plenty of ideas," he says. She tells him, she always believed in him. "So, Mom, call that place today and tell him you're through," he says. She shrugs and says, "All right, I'll do it." All right, next we're at the restaurant. George and Nina are having dinner again, and she's very much enjoying her food. She excuses herself, and, George has no problem with that tonight because he thinks Babs is in there. "Oh, yes," he says, "be fresh, stay fresh." Then we see another woman leaving her table from another part of the restaurant and says she has to go to the bathroom, telling her friends she's not feeling very well. That actress is named Tish Smiley, and she's also appeared in Knots Landing, One Day at a Time, Tales from the Crypt. And Tish, good sick acting, very good. A waitress comes by to the table, and George asks if she knows Babs. "Oh, yes," she says. "I was sorry that she left." "What?" George says. She tells him, she quit today. Oh, no. This actress is Cheryl Frances Harrington, and she is very recognizable. I've seen her in many shows. In fact, she's appeared in over 100 shows and movies, including The PJs, Diagnosis Murder, Glee. And she's very sweet. I really like her as the waitress. Well, after George finds out that news, he runs from the table. We see him approach the women's bathroom, where we can hear a woman retching. So he busts in, "Ah-ha!" And then Nina comes in from around the corner of the bathroom. "What are you doing in here, George?" She was brushing her hair in the mirror. "Oh, just wanted to see what you wanted for dessert." Then Nina walks away annoyed. And then the vomit woman exits her stall, and George asks, "How you feeling?" All right, next we're on the street. Newman is on the street. He's getting his cigarettes out. Babs approaches and says hello, asks him what he's up to. He's just minding his own business. They're pretty flirty with each other. He offers her a cigarette. They kind of lock eyes. All right, next we're at Jerry's apartment. Jerry hears George pounding on Kramer's door. He opens it up, and George tells Jerry that Babs never showed up. Everything blew up in his face. That's a shame. Oh, and then George remembers, how did it go with Sandy? Jerry tells George, well, she's into it. Not only that, but the roommate's into it too. Oh, George is so excited for him. Oh, it's a scene, man. George says, do you ever just thank God that you know me and have access to my dementia? And Jerry's like, well, I'm not going to do it. You're not going to do it? What do you mean you're not going to do it? And Jerry explains how he's not an orgy guy and all the elements that he doesn't possess, weirdo lighting, lotions, amongst other things. He can't do it. Next, we're still in Jerry's apartment. George is saying if only that could happen to him. Oh, shut up. You couldn't do it either. I know, George says. Elaine enters. She's distraught because, she got caught by Miss Landis's assistant, who will definitely tell on her, and now she'll never get a job at Doubleday. And just like me, Jerry doesn't understand how you can get in trouble for taking your own racket. Well, meanwhile, Mr. Pitt needs a brew line for his match with Ethel Kennedy. Kramer enters and they both say, "Hi, Cosmo." Jerry asks Kramer if he can get Newman's brew line for Elaine. And Kramer's like, yeah, he's on vacation. Let's go over to his apartment. George confronts Cosmo about Babs hanging him out to dry. Well, yeah, she quit. It would have been nice if someone told him that she quit. Kramer says, "You know what? Talk to her." "Well, where is she?" "I don't know." And then Kramer opens Newman's door to find he and Babs on the couch together getting busy. "Mom!" "Cosmo!" she says. Newman tries to explain frantically, but then he pauses. "Cosmo?" All right, I'm going to take a quick break, and I will see you on the other side. Do you love humor, but you can only laugh on the inside? Are you the only one in a group who doesn't make a sound when watching something funny? Do you feel depressed about your inability to LOL? Hi, I'm Pooja Matthews, founder of the Tee-Hee Institute, a leading center for laugh therapy. I used to suffer from laughteritis, or the inability to audibly laugh, a condition that is no laughing matter. At the Tee-Hee Institute, you will receive the highest quality training from licensed chuckle therapists who will design a program that works for you and your sense of humor. You will start at the Ha Ha Boot Camp and eventually work your way up to HICS, high-intensity knee slapping. The Tee-Hee program does take time, so patience is a must. Rushing the process can lead to literal gut busts and the splitting of sides. So for your own safety, we start out small. A soft titter leads to a slight chuckle. Then a hearty giggle. And before you know it, you're at a full guffaw. If you are able to LOL, but suffer from an awful sounding laugh, the Tee-Hee Institute can help with that too. No matter what terrible sounds you make, whether it's loud, coarse ha's, ha ha, the donkey bray, or the Seth Rogen, we can train your laugh to come out sounding very palatable to the ear. Visit our website, www.icanhearyourhaha.giggle today, and start your journey to a life full of LOL. The Tee-Hee Institute. And we're back. There were some extras for this episode, most notably some deleted scenes. So in a deleted scene, we see Miss Landis tell Elaine how she got hurt. So it turns out she used the brew line to beat her older brother at tennis, which she had never done before. And it was thanks to the brew line. It made her play like she never had. So she was so excited that she beat her older brother that she decided to jump over the net after the match was over. But as you can see, I didn't make it. So apparently she tried to jump over the net and didn't make it. That's how she hurt her arm. There was also a little bit more to the scene between Elaine and Jerry, where Elaine is explaining why she couldn't ask for the racket back. She's like, "I couldn't ask for it back. I mean, it would be like asking a dying man for his shoes." And Jerry's like, "Well, why does a dying man have my shoes?" Elaine's like, "Look, I don't want to get into another analogy thing with you here. The point is," Elaine says, "that she has a chance to get a real job in her chosen field. And that means she can stop picking salt off of Mr. Pitt's pretzels." And Jerry says, "It could be worse. You could be patting oil off of his pizza." Well, thank God I haven't had to do that. Yeah, they were right about cutting all that crap out. I'm like, what? Patting oil off of pizza? Like, how is that worse than salt? I don't know. It was not very strongly written. I did like the extended scene with Landis about beating her older brother because, again, Gail Strickland as Landis, I could watch her all day. She's so funny to me. In the notes about nothing for this episode, It's pointed out that Elaine had some deleted dialogue that she was actually supposed to kind of defend Nina, like, hey, George, you don't know that she's throwing up. She's probably really freshening up, like she's saying. And George replies, well, she doesn't look any fresher. She looks exhausted. And then I guess Jerry makes this argument, which I think is actually really funny, that once the food hits her stomach, George surrenders all rights to it. It's hers to do with what she wants. I thought that was very Seinfeldian and very clever. All right, now it is time to open Greg's Sack Lunch. Greg is our most dedicated contributor to this podcast, and every week we get a sack full of his thoughts. So the first thing in Greg's Sack Lunch is his favorite scene and his favorite Elaine moments. He says, George's story yet again is my favorite. Yet it is unbelievable that he gets another stunningly gorgeous woman out of his league. I feel like the bulimic storyline may not fly these days, as he is so non-sympathetic towards her if she truly had the disorder. But I do love how this storyline plays out, especially when Elaine tries to step in with, and you're concerned, as if she already knows he's an ass. Totally, Greg. I didn't really tackle it with my thoughts about it, but yeah, this would not fly today. We can't joke about such an awful, awful eating disorder. I will say, though, it's from the perspective of an asshole. Let's face it, of course, the only thing George would be concerned about is that his money is being wasted. It's not a funny topic whatsoever, but the approach of this where George is just being such an asshole, again, I think it paints him more in the terrible light than actually punching down to such an awful eating disorder. So for me, that's what I focus on. And yeah, of course, Elaine's like, I know where this is going. And I do love the way she asks, so you're concerned? Yeah, right. No, of course he's not. Next in Greg's sack, he says, I love how Elaine points out to Jerry that his girlfriend never laughs. You would think he would have noticed that already, and I like that Elaine is the one who points it out. They can openly critique each other's romantic choices at this point, and there is rarely a mention of them as a former couple. The best part of Jerry's story, though, is how he and George devised the switch. Again, Jason Alexander's performance steals the show here. Exactly. I mentioned too how I love it. I love that it's Elaine that points it out. And you're right. I've said before on this podcast, I never liked Jerry and Elaine as a couple. I feel like that whole thing should be buried and never mentioned again. So, I definitely never want reference made to that time. But it is important to note here, she's pointing this out as a total platonic friend, just like an observation that George could have made too, or Kramer could have made. And it's not made with any hint of jealousy or trying to put her down because, oh, she's a girl going out with Jerry. No, there's none of that. And I so love that we're past all of that crap. The switch part of the episode is so brilliant, so well done. And Jason Alexander, yeah, he cannot be matched. He is so incredibly perfect pretty much all the time, I have to say. But anyway, yeah, I completely agree there. Greg goes on to say, Elaine's story with the tennis racket is kind of meh to me. It's amped up to be this big dilemma out of nothing. There needed to be something more to it to give it more meat. I agree. And that's what I say. In this episode, it's so weak. I'm going to say it again. Afterthought plot, guys. Afterthought plot. I feel like they spent 10 minutes writing this whole thing for Elaine. It's just not a lot of thought put into it. And I will get more into my ideas about how they could have made it meatier, to use Greg's term. Next, Greg says, I love how George tells Elaine and Jerry about Kramer's first name. Their laughter as he enters cracks me up. Yeah, that laughter moment is so much fun. And I mentioned how it's just like these four friends laughing together. And even though we're not touchy, huggy, feely show, it's just a fun way to see these four interact because, we don't see them laughing together very much. Even the little handshake between Jerry and Kramer, there's something just very sweet about that too. These are just good friends. Yeah, they're making fun of his name, but you know what? They do that, and that's just how they act with each other, and I love it. All right, next in Greg's sack is his scene swap idea. I wish Elaine was more involved in Jerry's story to switch out his girlfriend for the roommate. Not that she would have helped Jerry do this, but it would have made for some funny moments if she had somehow either heard the plan or was the one who came up with the final idea to make it work. As a woman, she would know better than these two knuckleheads. Totally. Yes, totally. I get more into that in my final thoughts as well. That's one of my ideas to give JLD more to do in this episode, but I completely agree. And finally, Greg's extra thoughts. He says, I have to say, I love Babs Kramer. I wish they had done more with her. She's the only person to ever add any kind of depth to Kramer, as he is always such a one-dimensional kind of more there for comedic effect character. Putting her with Newman was a dumb move by the writers. I would have just wanted to see more of her and Kramer together. That is a really good point. I did mention how I love Babs as well. I thought that was a really good choice. Everything about her I thought was a really good choice, and Cherie North does a great job. I don't care for the Newman thing either. First of all, it just kind of grosses me out. Why would Newman do this? I think that a reconciliation between Kramer and his mom could have, kept coming back in different episodes. I think it would have been really great to see her, become like the Costanzas or the Seinfelds. They come in she would come in every now and then and have some kind of a storyline with Kramer. Because I mentioned it in that little scene where he's walking her down the street, they're arm in arm. I thought that was very sweet. And to your point, Greg, it gives some more dimension to the Kramer character. And I'm sure as an actor, Michael Richards would have loved that as well. So I really agree with that. I think that's a great idea, but alas, we don't get any more Babs Kramer. Thank you so much, Greg. We always love your thoughts. And now it's time to close Greg's sack lunch. All right, moving on to my favorite Elaine moments. Kind of slim pickings here. I still think JLD does a really good job in this episode, but like I've said a billion times before, I'm not a big fan of the plot, but I do like that she's the one that blurts out, Cosmo! I think it's so well done. Great laugh acting, of course, but that's a fun moment. A close second is her trying to cheer up Miss Landis. I love that sort of nervous, uncomfortable performance that JLD does so well. The sort of biking and hiking. Like she's just trying to cheer her up and not doing a good job. And my final notes for the episode, it's an afterthought plot, so weak. Elaine is better than this. I just don't believe that this is how Elaine would handle this situation. So I'm not a big fan of the plot. I have so many ideas, in fact, like scene swap ideas. Like, why didn't she just play Miss Landis? Maybe that could have been the conflict. She didn't want to beat Miss Landis, so she could get the job at Doubleday. Maybe she would let Miss Landis beat her so that she could, definitely get that job. And then maybe that's how Miss Landis hurts herself. We could still get the and that's how Elaine loses the job or something. I don't know. But I think that would have been really funny. Like some more interaction between the two of them. I would have loved to see Elaine more involved in the other plots, like trying to get Sandy to laugh maybe, or weigh in on this whole threesome idea. She definitely would have had something to say about that. Because the other plots in the episode are really funny. And they're so funny that they definitely have enough reach that Elaine could have been involved in a more meaningful way. I mean, Elaine could have been a spy for George. She could have been the one going into the bathroom. Maybe there could have been a situation just like how she helped George poison his boss. He can be, I just like Elaine being his go-to for sort of sneaky purposes. I think that could have been so much better. And so there are just so many more funnier possibilities than the whole tennis racket crap. And I think that's all I can say about the switch. Please be sure to follow the podcast on social media. On Instagram, it's at Hot Heavy Elaine. On TikTok, at Elaine Bennis Podcast. And if you'd like to email me, please do at elainepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.